Welcome to the Sutherland Report once again. I am delighted to spend the time with you and extremely excited to bring on a friend of mine and also our special guest, which I hope that we have the opportunity to talk to again and again. So I'm going to bring on my friend, dear friend John Haller, and also the amazing Robert Spencer. John, good to see you. Robert,
good to see you.
Thank you so much for joining us. It's a real privilege to meet you. And before we just get into things straight away, I want to tell you a little story. This is important to me, which is, as you said off camera, you might not have looked at this little book for a while. It's not that little. But in 2013, I read this book, and it was one of the inspirations for a short film that I went on to produce called Between Lambs and Lions. I read that book on a little Balearic island, I think, of Lanzarote. And on page 144, you then mentioned someone else called Christopher Booker, who I've also had the privilege to work with. Sadly, he's no longer with us, but I made something called Flexit the Movie. So I just want to salute you and Pamela Geller for writing that. Because I know why, as well I can reflect on in history, why you wrote that, as we're looking back so many years. But thank you for being the inspiration for that and for what I went on to do. Robert, can we, I've looked at your website today. I'm aware of an article that is on there. So could we start, if you don't mind, with the appalling events that we saw unfold at Bondi Beach in Sydney, in Australia. I would like to hear your comments. I think we could spend all the show on this in regard to politicians ignoring warnings, etc. Mm-hmm. But you're the person to talk to, Robert. Just give us your opinion, please.
Well, this is entirely to be expected. Anybody could have seen it coming, and there will be many more attacks like it. And so we have to ask, is the Prime Minister of Australia and the government of Australia in general stupid or evil? The same thing could be asked of the governments of Britain, of various countries in Western Europe, and of the United States and Canada. Do they really not realize that this sort of thing will keep on happening? Or do they not care? Or do they even want it? And I think that there is a case that can be made for the idea that this is something that they don't consider to be a negative. Now, you might think this is a crazy conspiracy theory. I don't think it's really that much of a reach. These people are socialist internationalists. You know, in Britain, that Starmer was, we've seen his membership in the Communist Party when he was a young man. And he went to, to Czechoslovakia, I believe it was, for training. There's no indication that he's moderated his views since then. And so what would a socialist internationalist think of these things happening? He would think, this is exactly what we need in order to destabilize, weaken, and ultimately destroy the existing system so that we can replace it with our own authoritarian socialist internationalist utopia. And they're trying to use the Islamic jihadis as a cat's paw to destroy the existing system, and then they think they'll be able to take advantage of the wreckage to build their new workers' paradise. They have not reckoned upon the power of the people they are using. I think ultimately they will suffer the fate, if they succeed in destroying the West, they will suffer the fate of the communists in Iran, who allied with Khomeini, supported the Islamic Revolution, thought they'd have a place in the government, and ended up in prison and executed. Same thing will likely happen in Britain and elsewhere.
And you're referring to, when you refer to Starmer's past, who now happens to be the Prime Minister of the UK, and I just about managed to get those words out without being impolite. The fact is that you're referring to John, and I have also had the privilege to interview Trevor Loudon, and I met Trevor over here when he flew over here for a meeting in May, and you're referring, like yourself, also to Trevor's research, where it's on his website in regard to Keir Starmer. But one thing, without getting too conspiratorial, no one talks about his membership of the Trilateral Commission in 2017 to 2022. That's another rabbit hole, but people don't talk about this at all. And Robert, when we go into people's background, what about Albanese? It seems as though he's never left his student politics and has taken him into cabinet in Australia. Your thoughts?
Well, that's exactly so. And that's exactly the point, that we are being ruled by an international cabal that's essentially a traitor class that does not have the best interests of the citizens at heart. Albanese wants to create a socialist Australia that would be part of a larger international conglomerate, which is exactly what Starmer wants to do, and what Macron wants to do, and what Friedrich Merz wants to do, and whoever it is in Sweden. It's all the same. And they all, not coincidentally, are entirely blind to the jihad threat. There's a jihad massacre, and they issue expressions of shock and horror, and then they continue all the policies that brought the jihadis into the country to start with. So,
Go ahead. Sorry.
I don't believe they're total idiots. I believe that these are very intelligent people who know exactly what they're doing. And that leads us to the other alternative, that they are not stupid, they're evil.
And if we look at the article that's on your website, and suddenly, please correct me, if we seem to get the opinion that now all Australia is suddenly not talking about the appalling tragedy that's gone on, and the just ignoring that after having many warnings, including from the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, where he's talked about writing a letter to Albanese, and the fact that they're all suddenly talking about gun control and how can this man get hold of 6 guns. Robert, where do we go with this?
That fits precisely into the idea that this is something that the elites want, because this is something that Albanese is going to use in order to institute more control of the citizenry and make it more difficult for them to fight back against tyranny. And so the gunman in question, he didn't get the guns legally, and he doesn't care what laws they're going to be on the books. Jihadis are always going to be able to get guns. Gun control laws aren't going to stop them, but they're going to stop the people who might resist the imposition of an authoritarian regime in Australia.
And we are at this present point, as far as if my memory serves me correct, we're looking at 12 dead. One of them is one of the terrorists, but we are also looking at 29, 30 people injured, some of those very seriously injured, that are in hospitals in that area at the moment.
I believe
Robert,
it's 15 and 40 now.
I do apologize. Sorry. Thank you for saying that. John, do you want to jump in, because I'll just quickly say this, Robert, as well. You know, we look at Mark Carney, we look at Canada, we look at Trudeau before that, and certain incidents that happened there as well. So mindful of all of this, and also John and I, as you are, Robert, are then concerned about, for argument's sake, America. How come other Arab nations have then banned the Muslim Brotherhood? Right, the UK seems to have a bit of a problem on this. Suddenly, I think President Trump is going, we need to ban the Muslim Brotherhood. I'm also aware of or maybe not, right? We'll come to that. I'm also, and I just want to say this, Robert, that sadly, you correct me, you were banned from coming into the UK by Theresa May, if I'm not mistaken, to then talk at a memorial in regard to the appalling tragedy, appalling actions that came against dear Lee Rigby. Am I correct in saying that as well?
Yes, that's right. It was in 2013, and Pamela Geller and I were going to come to lay a wreath at a memorial. That's all. Not speak, not agitate, not bring down the government. And in any case, we were banned from the country. As far as I know, the ban is still in place. And it's noteworthy because so many jihad preachers have entered Britain and spoken without any difficulty to large crowds since then. It's very clear that the British authorities don't really mind if you speak about jihad violence as long as you're in favor of it. If you're against it, then they don't want you in the country or they want you silenced. But if you're for it, then come right in.
And Melanie Phillips' book Londonistan raises all of those issues quite rightly. Robert, did they ever explain to you why you were banned, even though you've just explained the obvious to us? But did they ever explain that?
I was banned for explaining the obvious. Right. They sent me a letter from the Home Office. I remember I was right in this office, and the truck came with and the delivery guy comes out, and he was actually impressed and said, "It's from the British government." And I thought, oh, great. I know what this is going to be. And it said that I was forbidden to come into the country because I had said that Islam has doctrines of warfare that entail the subjugation of unbelievers. Now, that's a fact. That's not something I originated. It's not a lie. It's not a falsehood or a fantasy. It's a readily demonstrable fact from the Islamic texts. And so the British government essentially banned me from the country for saying something on the order of water is wet.
So, Robert, I've been following you for a very long time. Unfortunately, it doesn't seem like the situation has gotten better over the last, in fact, I think it'll be 25 years this year is the 25th anniversary of remembering what happened on 9/11. Maybe we could just go straight to the Bondi Beach attack and tell us a little bit about what you saw, both in what happened, how the police response was, and then the news conferences afterward. I'm sure you've seen these, especially one police woman saying, well, we're all for diversity. That's our strength here. And so just comment a little bit on that, on what we saw happen yesterday in Sydney.
There were so many terrible things about it. One was that they were able to keep firing for fully 10 or 12 minutes while the police stood by and did nothing, which once again, you have to ask, were the police completely incompetent? Possibly. I'm not going to assume that the police had their best people out at this point and at that precise place and time. But it is also possible that they were told not to go in, that the government wanted there to be as many casualties as possible. And here again, why would they want that? In order to destabilize and destroy the existing system, to set Australians against one another, to make native Australians believe that they're unsafe, and they are, and to allow the Islamic jihadis to enjoy this victory and to continue to advance until ultimately they attain their goal. Now, the other aspect of this is that these were clearly trained cadres. These were not a couple of guys who decided to open fire because they're angry about Gaza. These were very clearly highly trained professional killers. You can see the video of especially the younger one, the son. It was a father and son duo, and he is handling his machine gun extremely expertly. He knows exactly how it works and how best to maximize its potential, and he's doing it. If you give me a machine gun, you're going to have to give me a tutorial. And if I've happened upon a machine gun, I'm not going to be using it with the efficiency that he was using it. But this guy, clearly, he's fired a machine gun many times before. He's been trained, he's experienced, and he was sent there very likely for this purpose. There are inquiries that the Australian government says, I don't trust the Australian government, but they say that they are now undertaking inquiries into the possibility that he was trained from the Islamic Republic of Iran. And there were also reports, which may or may not contradict the ones about Iran, that he was trained by a jihad group in Pakistan. But whatever may be the case in that regard, the worst aspect of this is that here you have a trained jihad killer, and he just waltzes into Australia with no problem whatsoever. And the government was either unaware of his background or indifferent to it. Either way, it's very bad. It's inexcusable. This is just the sort of person that if the Australian government had any interest in protecting its own people, he would never have been in Australia at all.
Your article refers to the links potentially with other terrorist groups, where it goes back to 2019, and that again they were and also earlier, not long ago, they were following the son of these two, and then after a few months they thought, no, everything's fine, we'll just leave it, right? Which refers to the incident, sadly, that happened in Florida at the nightclub. I believe that's what is writing here, where it's a case. I mean, you're fully aware at the moment. I thought the figure was 40,000, but I heard it today. We've got 43,000. I don't know how we do it on the watch list here that we're supposed to be following. How we do it in regard to the power to do. Yeah, sorry, Robert.
Somewhere they're not being watched. They're on a list somewhere in somebody's office, but they're not being watched. These guys are walking around with impunity. There might be a few of them who are genuinely being who are genuinely under surveillance, but for the most part, they can do whatever they want. And if they end up committing mass murder, then we will hear that they were on a watch list, and that's it. The watch lists all over the West are useless. They are testimonies to the impotence and indifference of the authorities and to their inability or unwillingness to identify the people who are really dangerous, because that would get them into questions about Islam, and they don't want to talk about Islam, and they want to pretend that Islam has nothing to do with any of these problems. And so they can't vet these people properly, and they let them run around free hoping for the best. And what happens, therefore, what happened at Bondi Beach is going to happen many more times.
What can we do to take the experience from Bondi Beach and the lack of a response and transfer it over to like here in the United States or like Mark in the UK?
Same thing happens here all the time. As a matter of fact, the same thing happens in the UK, in Australia, in Germany, France, Sweden, Italy, United States, Canada. I used to do a show every week with David Wood called This Week in Jihad.
Yeah.
I haven't been feeling so well lately and haven't been doing it. Can't keep up with everything. But we did also, there was another issue. We did so many episodes, and it was just that. This Week in Jihad, we would cover the jihad news that I have at jihadwatch.org every week. The problem is it's always the same. And this is how it is. You could have a template on your computer, and it says on blank date, and you type in December, 13th, 14th, at blank, Bondi Beach, Sydney, Australia, an Islamic jihadi, or this number of Islamic jihadis, killed this many people. And afterward, the local mosque said that they were worried about Islamophobia. The local press focused on the Islamophobic reaction, and the local police said this has nothing to do with Islam and we love diversity. This is what happens every last attack, and this is how it's been for years. And so what can we learn from the Bondi Beach attack is what we can learn from every last jihad attack going back to 9/11, and that is that we're approaching this all wrong. And that this fictional construct that we have put into place about how Islam is peaceful, tolerant, and benign has no doctrines that we need be concerned about, and nothing within its teachings that possibly incites any of its adherents to violence. And in the unlikely event that any of them do commit an act of violence, it's not the fault of the religion. And the worst thing we could do would be to think that it has anything to do with Islamic teaching or call upon Muslims to look to themselves or reform. What we have to do instead is bring more of them over here and show how welcoming we are. And then everything will be okay. These are all a series of false premises built upon each other. And it just gets higher and higher and higher, but it's inevitably going to collapse because every last one of these propositions is not true. And it might be very comforting to people to think, I am tolerant and broad-minded, and I am not narrow-minded, bigoted, and racist and Islamophobic. And I don't think that I need to worry if my neighborhood becomes 50% Muslim because they're just like everybody else. And they are. Human nature is everywhere the same. There are wonderful people who are Muslims and terrible people who are Muslims. But there's another aspect to the problem, and everyone is confused about this. Islamic teaching, Islam is unique among the religions of the world in having a doctrine of warfare against unbelievers and the conquest and subjugation of unbelievers. And consequently, you bring Muslims in, some of them are going to pursue that conquest and subjugation. And the longer we pretend that this is not possible and will never happen and could not happen, and the only bad people in the scenario are those who are pointing out that it could happen, the more it's going to happen.
Robert, am I right in saying that David Wood was also, if I've got the person right, was also banned from coming into the UK as well?
Yes, that's right. I believe he was going to go there a few months, maybe about 6 months ago, and was banned. Yes.
Was he given a good reason for that as well? Did a van turn up with another letter from the British establishment saying that? I'm
not entirely sure. You'll have to ask David. But as I recall, he was filling out some kind of a form for the visa as a pro forma thing just to get into the country, and then suddenly it says, no, you're blocked. You're banned. I don't know that there was an explanation in his case or a letter. It was all computerized. Maybe I was dealt with in an earlier age when things were still handled by the post.
So what you raise is that sorry, John, that what you're raising, Robert, we could say without sounding too conspiratorial, a phrase I seem to be using constantly in this interview, is the fact that there is a list and he was on it.
Oh, yeah. There are many of us who've been banned. Pamela Geller and I were banned at the same time because we were both going to go to this ceremony for drummer Lee Rigby. And then trying to remember some of the others. Martin Sellner out of Germany and his wife Brittany, who's an American. They were banned from the country. Geert Wilders, of course, the Dutch politician, was banned, but he was able to appeal successfully. Pamela Geller and I appealed, but we lost the appeal. And so Geert, I believe, can go in. But there's also, I kept a list for many years, both of jihad preachers who got in with no problem, and also of foes of jihad violence who were banned. And I think you can still find both in the archives at JihadWatch. Running tally.
Wow. John, go ahead, please, sir.
Well, so let me maybe shift gears a little bit away from Bondi Beach, because we can agree that this was clearly an act of terror. They weren't offenders, they were terrorists. But I'm really concerned, Robert. Mark and I were just in Israel. I was also there a couple of weeks before him. We were down at the Gaza envelope and traveling around different communities in Israel, learning about what's going on there. And so there's this, and I've been covering this on my own personal news updates that I do each week. I don't know how to say this in a Christian way, but what in the Sam Hill is going on with the Trump administration in Qatar and this supposed, which Mark interprets as a ban on the Muslim Brotherhood, which it is not. So unpack that a little bit for us, because it's hard for me to explain rationally what's going on.
Well, yeah, in the first place, the ban on the Muslim Brotherhood that came from the Trump administration was not a ban on the Muslim Brotherhood. It was a declaration that there ought to be the beginning of an inquiry into whether the Muslim Brotherhood should be banned. But it wasn't even, in that case, the Muslim Brotherhood that threatens the West. The Muslim Brotherhood chapters in Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon were named as being banned or under the consideration for being banned. The Muslim Brotherhood chapters in Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon may cause a lot of trouble in Egypt, Jordan, and Lebanon, but that's it. This was really just a gesture of solidarity with the Egyptian government of Assisi, the Jordanian government of King Abdullah, and the Lebanese government of Joseph Aoun. That was it. The Muslim Brotherhood in the United States and the Muslim Brotherhood all over the West comes out of Qatar and Turkey and gets its funding from those countries. And in the United States, every major Muslim group, most notably the Council on American Islamic Relations, is a Muslim Brotherhood organization in some form or another. It's linked in some way. And it's Qatar and Egypt that is funding all that. Qatar and Turkey, that is funding all this. And so the Trump administration did nothing about that. Now, why? And why is it that 9 years ago in 2016 on the campaign trail, Trump said Qatar was a main threat, a big threat in financing terror, and now they're our great pals, our wonderful friends? It seems as if he has been the successful victim of an influence operation. That there were reports coming several years ago that Qatar was targeting Trump and his supporters in a very sophisticated effort to turn them into friends of the Qatari regime. And now we see that Trump has indeed turned and is a friend of the Qatari regime, even though they were hosting the leaders of Hamas on October 7th. And the Hamas top dogs are there in Doha in a luxury hotel watching on some sort of closed circuit hookup the October 7th attacks and getting down and praising Allah that he allowed them to murder Israelis. And this is the same government. It hasn't changed. It hasn't repented. It hasn't turned over the Hamas leaders. As a matter of fact, Trump forced Netanyahu to call the Qatari government and apologize for trying to take out the Hamas leaders in Doha. So what does all this tell us? Clearly, he's changed his mind. I don't think he's changed his mind on the basis of any solid evidence, because Qatar is the same as it's always been, one of the leading sponsors worldwide of the Muslim Brotherhood. So what's changed is that they carried out an influence operation, and by whatever means, giving him an airplane or giving him business interests in Qatar or something else, they have turned him and rendered his response to the jihad threat in the United States absolutely toothless.
John and I did a show on the Doha Forum a few days ago, and we're going, why? Let's say it bluntly, why is Don Jr. there, for argument's sake? Why are you attending this? We've all worked out why Tucker Carlson was there, 1789, and all that investment comes to mind, and then other individuals in there, but. But Robert, we're asking these questions, and we're privileged to talk to you because we're suddenly going, well, hold on a minute. And John's more of an expert on this than me. But we've even got the new Syrian leader, in the White House, for crying out loud. How many millions of dollars were on his head a few months ago, and then there he's playing ball with one of the CENTCOM generals. Robert, what is going? It is.
It's embarrassing.
Right. Go on, sir. Go on.
Well, the guy, he's Al Qaeda. There's no indication that he's changed, except that he's wearing a tie. The guy, just a few years ago, was not only Al Qaeda, but was allying with ISIS. And what's happened since he's taken control of Syria? There have been mass murders of Christians, Alawites, and Druze.
Yes.
What do jihadis do but engage in mass murder and ethnic cleansing of targeted non-Muslim populations so that they can take over and Islamize a whole area more easily? And that's exactly what they're doing now in Syria. Syria was a Christian majority to begin with. Hundreds at the beginning in the Islamic conquest in the 7th century. And over time, the Christians were so oppressed that most of them converted to Islam, and those are the Muslims of Syria today. But Islam has not changed. And now he is implementing the same kind of oppressive tactics in order to compel the non-Muslims either to flee or to convert. So how has he changed? Just the other day, they were celebrating the first anniversary of the overthrow of Assad. And how did they do it? By chanting Khaybar, Khaybar, Ya Yahud, the famous chant, Khaybar, Khaybar, O Jews, the army of Muhammad will return. That is a threat to the Jews that Muhammad's army is going to come back and continue what Muhammad did, which was massacre Jews. These are stories out of Islamic tradition that Muhammad first exiled 2 of the Jewish tribes of Medina and then massacred the 3rd, and then traveled to where they had been exiled, Khaybar, and massacred the other 2. And this is what they're saying they're going to do again. So this guy is reformed? There isn't the slightest evidence of that. So why on earth is Trump having him to the Oval Office and acting as if he's the second coming of Thomas Jefferson? It's frankly embarrassing.
Is this to do all with the Abraham Accords and going, I'm just trying to find peace? The definition of that, you and I, there's a long conversation on that one. And being totally, all I can conclude respectfully is that totally hoodwinked by all of this. Robert, you're the expert. I just feel totally, and I hear it when you turn around and say, this is embarrassing. You've been shouting about this with all your experience for years and years. So have other people. And then suddenly it's like, oh, we've now had a bunch of jihadis that have just gone into the White House. Where do we go?
Several things. One is that Trump frankly admires Recep Tayyip Erdogan, the president of Turkey. And Erdogan is behind Ahmed al-Shara, the president of Syria, the jihadi. Erdogan's troops occupy large portions of Syria, and he is also Muslim Brotherhood and Al-Qaeda, and al-Shara is his puppet. What we really have in the jihadi takeover of Syria is the Turkish takeover of Syria and the elaboration of Erdogan's aspirations to restore the Ottoman Empire. And so that's one thing. Trump thinks Erdogan is great. And so Erdogan tells him, who knows what he told him when he was in the White House, but it was probably something on the order of, he's keeping peace in Syria. He's got troops there to pacify the situation. It's a very tough area, but he's got it under control, and Trump is grateful.
And we must say that he's also, NATO is also a member of, Turkey is also a member of NATO.
So he's ipso facto our ally and friend. And so Trump is hoodwinked on that basis. Also, Trump is deeply skeptical, and with good reason, quite rightly, deeply skeptical of the foreign policy establishment of the West. The foreign policy establishment of the West is disastrous, and he should be skeptical of it. But what he's replacing it with is not any better. He's rejected the idea that we can form alliances on the basis of common interests in democracy or something like that. We tried to establish Western-style secular republics in Iraq and Afghanistan, was wrong-headed from the start, wrongly conceived, wrongly executed, and wrongly ended. It was wrong all the way through, and Trump was a very vociferous critic of those misadventures. And he said, we're never going to be able to establish these kinds of democracies in those countries. They don't want them. They don't like it. They don't understand it. They will reject it as a Western import. And all of those things were true and correct. So what is he replacing it with? He is replacing it with his background as a businessman, that he can make deals. His book is The Art of the Deal. And he can deal with anybody because he can appeal to the person's own self-interest and say, if you do this, it will be good for you. That's what a salesman does. A salesman who's successful convinces people that they will be better off if they buy this thing, whatever it is. And so Trump is trying to do that with Ashura and with Erdogan and even with the Iranians, with everybody. It's how he became a billionaire. It worked all in that way. He knows the foreign policy establishment is rotten and stupid, so he's replacing it with going to these people and saying that he's going to make a deal. You remember he tried this in his first term also with North Korea. And he went over to see Kim Jong-un. He stepped into North Korea, first and only president to go there, although he was just right inside the border. And he made that video, you may recall, of the lights all over South Korea and North Korea in the dark, and saying it doesn't have to be this way. See, he's selling something to the North Koreans. You can make a deal with me that will benefit North Korea. And Kim Jong-un it was clear he was tempted, but he ultimately didn't go for it. And whether Ashura will go for it, or even whether he's even considering it, I actually very seriously doubt it. I think he's just thinking Trump is a fool that he can manipulate. Yeah. But Trump is trying a completely different approach. And I commend him for that, except that it's done with an insufficient understanding of what it means to believe in Islam and how that ideology interferes with his pragmatic considerations upon which he thinks he can make a deal.
Right. John, do you want me to bring this graphic on?
Yeah, put that graphic up. I want to ask Robert about that. So, Robert, I've been following Erdogan of Turkey for a very long time. He is very clever in the way that he's gone about this. I think he tried to do in Egypt in a short time what it took him well over a dozen years to do in Turkey to consolidate his power. But I wanted to share with this, Mark and I were talking to Ramlan Osman, who I think you may know, when we were in Jerusalem recently. And I shared this poster with her. She was quite interested in it. This was a poster of a rally that was led by Erdogan's son, Bilal, at the Galata Bridge in Istanbul on January 1st this year. And of course, it was a pro-Palestinian rally. but it has some very interesting imagery. I'll just recap it. I use it a lot in my talks about Erdogan and Turkey, which I think is certainly a rising problem that I don't think we really understand. But have you seen this poster before, by the way?
Never.
Okay. So it says a sun is rising, which is kind of a double entendre since it's led by Erdogan's son. But then it has three big buildings, one on the left. And mind you, this is just a few weeks after the fall of the Assad regime. So on the left is Hagia Sophia, which Erdogan turned into a mosque 5 years ago. And it said yesterday, Hagia Sophia, that's what it says across the top. Today, Umayyad, which is the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. And then tomorrow, Al-Aqsa. Do you think this fairly states the ultimate agenda of President Erdogan of Turkey?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. He's made that clear on numerous occasions. He has spoken about how, actually it wasn't him, it was Abdullah Gül, if I recall correctly, who was, what was he, prime minister or foreign minister? In any case, he was a high-level Turkish government official up until a few years ago. And he was speaking recently and said that any land that was part of the Ottoman Empire is still Turkish, and was saying Gaza, the people there are Turkish citizens because it was part of the Ottoman Empire. And he has also said, Erdogan has also said that the lands of the Ottoman Empire still belong to Turkey. And it was very clear, particularly in regard to Greece, that he intends to drive that home. He intends to make the attempt to reconquer those territories. He's also made that clear in terms of Armenia, with the action against Nagorno-Karabakh. Nagorno-Karabakh was an Armenian enclave within Azerbaijan, an accident of the Stalinist mapmakers when it was all part of the Soviet Union. And it was Armenian land from time immemorial, with churches going back to the 3rd century. And now there was just last year, a couple years ago, there was massive ethnic cleansing sponsored by Azerbaijan and Turkey with the support of the United States, clearing out those Armenians who'd lived there and their ancestors had lived there for centuries and centuries, displacing them and sending them into Armenia proper. And that's not the end. Now he is demanding a corridor that would cut through Armenian territory and unite Turkey to Azerbaijan. And ultimately, the idea is to create a greater Turkestan all the way across from Constantinople to Central Asia, where the Turks came from in the first place. And Armenia is the only non-Muslim entity standing in the way of that.
John?
Well, I just want to, as I was researching my news update for yesterday, Robert, I came across a couple of old videos. One was from probably 2015 or so, where Baghdadi went into the mosque, the Grand Mosque in Mosul, and was saying the same thing that al-Shara was saying a year ago when he went into the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus. I guess maybe the question is this: who among this cast of characters is the biggest threat that we need to watch out for?
You mean between Erdogan and
between Syria, Erdogan. We have the Iranian regime. It seems like it's whack-a-mole, but I mean, who's the most serious threat, at least right now, to say the United States?
Oh, I'd say Erdogan, because people don't realize he's financing Muslim Brotherhood mosques all over the United States. Those mosques are actively teaching subversion. This is something that is going to become apparent that isn't apparent now as to why it's so much of a threat. But you see that what happened in Bondi Beach, going back to the beginning of this conversation, what happened in Bondi Beach didn't happen out of nothing. The ground has been prepared for it for years in the mosques in Australia. It's the same thing here. And that's courtesy of Erdogan right now. The Saudis used to finance the Muslim Brotherhood mosques in the United States. But since MBS has taken over and started reforming, Erdogan has stepped into the breach. And yet he still bears the mantle of being an ally of the United States and a member of NATO. And so nobody's watching. Nobody's paying attention, and Trump thinks he's great. So he's able to proceed under the cover of their indifference.
So Trump thinks he's great. John, remind us about that tweet that comment he made to Erdogan, where he's trolling him in regard to when he said about, "Oh, we saw what you did in Syria." John, do you remember that comment?
Yeah, I mean, my contention has been the Syrian the collapse of the Assad regime was Erdogan's wet dream, and he was behind it all the way. And I think Trump has been trolling Erdogan on that. We know what you did in Syria, he'll say. I know you'll deny it, but we all know what really happened. Is that what you think happened in Syria? That this was a Erdogan operation by and large?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that that's any indication that Trump has any problem with Erdogan. I think he actually admires it. He admires men of action, and he admires strong men. I used to think, being a foe of the left, I used to get irritated when leftists would say, Trump, he's a wannabe dictator. I don't think Trump's a wannabe dictator, but I do think, not based on leftist polemic, but on just observing how he is with people like Erdogan, that he admires dictators. He likes the idea of a strong man who acts decisively and wishes that he could do that. That's not to say that he's going to trample the Constitution or any of that nonsense. I'm not subscribing to any of that hysteria or propaganda, but I don't think that he has a problem when he says everybody knows what really happened there or whatever. He's saying it with a certain amount of respect and affection.
Mm-hmm.
Robert, the other thing that concerned John and I think, John, please correct me if I got this wrong, which I think was the US ambassador to Turkey, where he made a comment at the Doha Forum saying that it's monarchies that work best within the Middle East, and was critical, seemed to be very critical of Israel's governance being the only democratic state within that region. John, have I got that right?
No, you heard correctly.
Yeah.
You're talking about Trump saying this, right?
Sorry?
Tom Barak.
Oh, well, sure, but he's Trump's emissary. It's the same thing. What Trump has done is he's picked people who share his contempt for the foreign policy establishment that I explained earlier, that they engaged in the idea of exporting democracy and nation building. And Trump thinks that was asinine, and it was. It was wrong-headed from the start, but not entirely for the reasons Trump thinks. He doesn't know anything about Sharia. He doesn't understand its hold on Muslim populations. And he just thinks, well, they're all authoritarian states, and that's what they've always all been. And so that's what they want. And they don't want democracy, so we'll give them authoritarian states. And that's about the depth, as far as I can tell, the depth of his thinking on this. And it is unfortunately leading us into new errors on top of the old ones from the nation building crowd.
I hear you. We've got about
Mark,
7 or 8. Sorry.
Okay, Mark, I'd like to ask Robert this.
Yeah.
So, Mark, one of the things that we sort of play around is each year The Economist comes out with a cover the world ahead, and they have these different things that they think will happen. It seems to be relatively, I don't know whether that's what they plan to do or they're just good at it because they're analyzing things all along. But I'd kind of like you to prognosticate a little bit for us about what do you think we can expect in 2026 in the near term? It's from someone who watches this, as you said, it seems impossible to keep up with the volume of things that are going on. But how do you think this is, what are some of the likely scenarios as how this is going to unfold in the coming year?
Well, it's always risky to predict the future, but I think that anybody who wants to bet that there will be more jihad attacks in the West on the order of what we saw at Bondi Beach, that would be a safe bet, and that they likely will be in the United States as well as in Europe. Also, the idea that Trump keeps insisting that he's brought peace to the Middle East will become impossible to sustain as Hamas resumes operations. It survived thanks to Trump, and he enabled it to continue its jihad, and it will continue its jihad, and we'll be seeing that in the coming months. Ukraine and Russia, I would expect that could end in the coming year. Not favorably to Ukraine, but hard to tell, really. I would expect that he will try to force a peace based on Ukraine making various territorial concessions of the Russian-dominated regions in the eastern part of the country, and that that could end the conflict. Neither of them really are able to keep fighting much longer anyway. The Russians have drastically underperformed. People thought they were going to roll in over Ukraine in a matter of days. And here we are, 3 years later, and they're still at it. And Ukraine has about exhausted its forces unless the European Union really wants to go in and fight, which they may, because they are suicidally destructive. But barring that could end.
Now, Robert's right. They are suicidally.
Well, I know. Always good to have allies that have that attitude. So,
well, there's a long discussion there. But I think Robert's observation of what's been of the European governance is outrageous. And we're looking at 4 years. I think it's 4 years next February 26th, since Russia invaded Ukraine. Robert, before we go, there's a lot more we could say, but I want to just quickly give you a few minutes to discuss your new book that's coming out, and I'm just going to flash that up. And The Tragedy of Islam: Failure and Excuses by Your Good Self. When will that be available to buy?
It's available to buy now. It will be out in April, but you can order it now at Amazon and I believe at Barnes & Noble. It's a book I've wanted to write for years, and I'm grateful to have had the opportunity. It's about how Islam doesn't work, that it's bad for individuals and bad for societies. I think that the parts about it being bad for societies will surprise a lot of people, because I show that there's a direct connection between how Islamic a society gets and it going into economic and political decline. And that's because it's essentially a parasitical system. And once it destroys the host, it dies. And so Islam, it mandates not that you work. It doesn't have a work ethic. It mandates that you live off the non-Muslim. Impoverished to pay the jizya, you gotta move on and conquer more territories. And once you run out of that, then you're running against the exhaustion of the dhimmi population versus your ability to conquer. And once the dhimmis are exhausted, then your tax base will be destroyed, your economy will go into free fall, and you'll be on the road to ruin. And so the more Islamic you get, the more you're likely to fail as a society as well as an individual.
Robert, thank you. I do apologise because I suddenly lost you internet-wise. I did pause and I restarted, and God willing, I've got you at the right point. How do we, Robert? Just finally, last minute. How do we get you in the White House to speak sense and elsewhere? I'm saying that seriously. I think this is one of the things to really pray for as well.
Well, I appreciate
how do we get you in there? Sorry.
I appreciate that, and I would go if I had the opportunity, but I'm not waiting by the phone. Fact is, I know several people in the Trump White House. They have never contacted me. They know where to find me if they wanted to, but they know that I'm at odds with the position that they're espousing, and so I'm not surprised that they have not reached out.
I am very alarmed and also very sad to hear that. So I think I would say to everyone who watching this that is something we really need to be praying about and pushing for you. Robert, can I just say thank you so much for joining John and I. And when you're free again within your busy schedule, we would love to be able to continue this conversation with you, if that's okay with you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. That would be great. I look forward to it.
Thank you. I'm gonna play us out, and I'll say goodbye on the other side. Well done, John. After all the tech challenges you've had, it's been a bit of a day, but thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mark.
And we'll continue this brilliant conversation on another day. Thank you.
Thank you.